everyone, welcome all to the 706 podcast, where we discuss which 706 movies should be considered the best of all time. My name is Kirk. I'm joined here by my co-hosts and co-creators. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Tony.
Tony, thank you very much.
Anthony.
I'm Connor.
Yes, so that is the formidable crew. So we will have a movie on the docket each week, and being the seminal week, I did choose the movie this week, and I thought I'd start us off with a bang, and so I chose the movie Spice World. Now, for those unacquainted, Spice World came out in 1997. It documents a British musical group called the Spice Girls. They were a pop sensation, a pop phenomenon in the late 90s. 5 girls, each with a distinct archetype. There's Baby Spice, Posh Spice, Ginger Spice, Sporty Spice, and Scary Spice. And so the 5 girls, over the period of 5 days leading up to a large concert at Albert Hall in London, are kind of followed by a fake documentary crew, and it just kind of it's like a day in the life, essentially. You know, it's very much the ins and outs of being a Spice Girl and what that entails. Yes, 1997. So that's I chose this movie because when I was younger, I did watch this movie in the 10s, maybe 10 to 15 times with my sister. She was a huge Spice Girls fan, so I thought just a little freebasing of nostalgia was necessary for this first episode, and I must say, my personal opinion of it is slightly changed. Back when I watched it, I was prepubescent, very wide-eyed little child, and looking back at it now, I can definitely see some things that are more salient than others. For instance, cleavage. I think this might hold the record for the most cleavage in a PG movie, but I don't want to get too into it. I want to open the floor for my fellow hosts here to kind of spitball, and I want to hear their opinions, and I hope they go easy on me because.
Sure. Well, wait. So, should we just say our favorite Spice Girls first? I think we should all say.
I think that's
Okay.
tradition.
Yeah, that's
all right. I'll go first. But on the line, I gotta say, not being super familiar with this team, a Fantastic Five. There are 4 of us, so we'll see who's not picked.
Ooh.
I gotta say, I wasn't familiar with them, but having seen the movie now, I'm a ginger man. I'm a ginger boy. Ginger Spice is my girl.
Cop out. Easy choice.
Come on, why is it easy? All right,
Too obvious. Everybody's favorite's Ginger.
My favorite growing up was always Baby Spice, the blonde, but I would have to side with Ginger as well. I mean, she seems to have the whole package. She's intellectual, but at the same time, she has huge breasts. So those are 2 things that really work well together. But at the risk of sounding like a man, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to break the mold here and go with Posh Spice, formerly now known as Victoria Beckham, but to me, she'll always be Victoria Adams, a person who I think is the key to this movie. But I'll leave that for later.
Yeah, we'll get back to
Connor.
I can't believe I'm saying it, but Sporty Spice. I liked her a lot in this.
Which
I
one
never
is
thought
Sporty
she's always
Spice?
considered the one that's like the least
The
like.
one with the volleyball all the time.
She's the most passed over of all of them, I think. I mean, compared to like Ginger or whatever, but she came out pretty well in this. Although I don't know. I mean, Ginger Spice is pretty nice. So
I think she might arguably be the only positive role model in the movie.
Sporty?
I completely disagree, but
okay.
We'll say that for later.
All right. Well, why don't we go around and why don't you guys just kind of tell me what you thought of the movie on its own merits? Yeah, let's hear. I don't want to preface it. I just want to hear. Let me hear.
Okay. Well, when he said he wanted to talk about Spice World on this thing, I was kind of against it. I was like, are you kidding me? Spice World, really? For the 706? And then I kind of thought about it, and I'm like, okay, I kind of like it because this is a movie that I would under no circumstances ever watch otherwise. I would never watch this movie. And it's a movie I think you have to see, like, you don't have to see when you're a kid, but you wouldn't watch it otherwise, really. Like, when I was, this is a movie, I felt like I'd seen it as a kid, even though I haven't. It totally fits into the ove of, like, I'm in the car, we have the DVDs, we got the Country Bears, the Disney movie, we got, extremely goofy movie, like, this would be right in with those titles in the car. But that being said, so I kind of expected this to be a total garbage fire, but it was not really at all, actually. It holds up pretty well, and I wouldn't say it's great, or I don't know if it's good even, but it's very interesting, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and there are some parts that are genuinely hilarious. It's a very funny movie. It's a very fun movie, and it's very, like, it's sort of like it eschews convention for this sort of movie. Like, it's not super plotty. Like, there are kind of plots in it. There's they're playing at different plots. Like, they've got, like, the guy who's following them around, like the tabloid photographer, and he's trying to, like, sabotage the Spice Girls and get them to, like, break up. And then you got the whole thing with these people who are trying to make a movie about the Spice Girls. And in other movies, a more conventional version of this, like, those will be the main threads. Or in this movie, they're just kind of in there, and nothing's really the main thread. It's kind of episodic. Like, you just got these different, like, silly little, almost like skits. And there's a lot of really silly stuff in this movie. A lot of really absurd, sometimes kind of surreal stuff. There are a couple fantasies and dream sequences and just really absurd humor. And I thought it had a lot more personality than I was really expecting. So I gotta say, I really enjoyed this movie.
Fair enough. Hot take from Tony here. Let's go on to Anthony and Connor.
Well, this movie, like Tony was saying, I think he did a good job of pretty much summarizing how most of us felt. But, it's a movie that is definitely a relic of the late 90s, pop culture there. But, and there are threads I like, the manager included, which I think we'll all get to later. But for me, the focus of the film, the Spice Girls themselves, were awful. This is a dangerous message they're showing. The Spice Girls are proving that the only way to succeed in life is to do so under tenuous stress by a rich benefactor and to adhere to industry. The movies basically...
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Now on to Connor.
Come on.
Let him finish.
Perpetuating, right?
Sure.
The tenets. Tony over here laughing at me. Perpetuating these sort of tenets that are saying you need to work, you can't have your personal life, and to do so is to risk your job, right? The other aspect of this, right, is if you don't follow the guidelines set by these upper classes, you end up as what you are, a working class member whose sole outlook is only murder, pregnancy, or some other less desirable outcome.
True.
Right? This is a film that is very classist. I think unless you have an understanding of the British culture, you're going to lose that. But for those who even don't understand it, it's there on the surface, and it's going to be... it's not on the surface, but it's there. It's underlying this whole film. But I think I'll move to Connor. I'll get to my criticisms later.
That's a super interesting reading. No, this movie fits right into its time, and I can only see it as kind of not being a little bit too young to have been around and been very aware of the Spice Girls. This is a very interesting historical document to me. I have no particular attachment to the Spice Girls. I do remember them slightly, sort of in people, talking about them afterwards as a piece of pop culture, but never when they were super popular. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much in Tony's boat here. I really loved the humor. It's very 90s humor. It's kind of it doesn't take itself seriously. There's all these kind of meta gestures and little things like there's characters who are there's a character who's like the writer who has to pitch an idea to the big exec and try to get how to make the Spice Girls movie and this kind of thing. So it's very self-referential and playful and lots of really crazy, really funny, just sort of tonal shifts and it's very elusive as with an A, very elusive. It's making a lot of references to a lot of movies, sometimes not in the best way. It's sort of not really parodying so much genres as much as just like nodding to individual films just to give you kind of the thrill of, oh, I know that.
There's a lengthy tangent. It's a Pulp Fiction reference where one of the movie ideas they pitch, this guy pitches numerous like Spice Girls movie ideas throughout the movie. and he says they're like the Spice Force 5, which is a reference to the Fox Force 5, which is the pilot that Uma Thurman's character mentioned she was in Pulp Fiction. It's really like kind of a random reference to make.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool,
but it's random.
It's very random, and then they dedicate like a couple minutes to it, and it's like fun and it's funny, but it's just like it's very like emblematic of this movie as a whole. It does a ton of stuff like that. It goes on all these like really weird tangents, and there's a bunch of stuff that's referenced that I don't really know what it's referencing. Like it's very clear, like there's no reason they'd be doing this unless it was a reference to something else because it's so weird. It's so specific.
Yeah.
But,
This is the kind. It takes nothing. It doesn't even take itself, very seriously or sacred anyway. It holds nothing as sacred, and that's very 90s. And I think, sort of in spite of it being Spice World, in spite of it being a movie about the Spice Girls, and I do think the Spice Girls parts are the weakest parts. It's fun to see their dynamic, but it's all the structure and all the jokes around the Spice Girls themselves. That's kind of the genius that really is that classic kind of Austin Powers style humor, or I think a Wayne's World or something like that. It really speaks to my sensibility.
Would this be as funny or anywhere near as funny if it had been an American pop group in America? I mean, is there some aspect of it that we're just we find it so novel because it's so very much in the vein of British pop culture and very similar to Austin Powers.
Good question.
Well, that's interesting, but I mean, the idea of musical groups in comedy films, I mean, it's nothing new. I mean, before this, of course, the famous example would be the series of Beatles films. Richard Layton's famous Hard Day's Night, of course. But I think this movie works, I think, interesting on its own. I think the references are there to try to appeal to the of course, the parents who most likely would have been dragged into the theater at this time. I am curious to know
that. We don't know the content. We don't know. But okay.
I mean, maybe not. I like to assume, giving faith to whoever directed this.
I, for one, when I saw this movie, I saw plenty of adult men in trench coats enter the theater. And they even left halfway through. They were just so content to let us watch the movie in peace.
On that note, real quick, I have something to bring up about this. Okay.
Confess.
There's something here that we need to discuss very briefly. So, this movie is rated PG, which is for those who don't know, parental guidance suggested. Now, I didn't have my parents with me for this, but I felt okay. But the reason for this rating, some vulgarity, brief nudity, and language. Now, this is the Spice World, and it says brief nudity. So my ears perked up. I'm very intrigued. And we all said, oh, it's going to be a man's butt. And sure enough, like 40 minutes in, 30 minutes in, something like this, there's a scene where they're doing like a little concert music video.
In Italy.
They're in Italy. And there are these men who, like, they have assless pants, and they're wearing, like, Speedos. Like, so we see the buttocks touching one another on, like, 3 men for a few seconds, and that's
PG. That's what makes it PG.
That's PG. If this were a woman's butt, this would be, like, hard PG-13, probably an R.
Not true. But, yeah, I'm sure there's language as well. I'm sure it being rated G would have been kind of odd, but it's PG. We'll call it PG.
There's a little bit. There's a few like references vaguely to adult stuff.
Well, there's some euphemisms. Yeah, there are some euphemisms.
There's a lot of things hinted. I mean, I think of the manager scene in particular, hinting at what's going to happen between the two of them and from engaging in sexual relations.
Well, this is a night of passion, which is PG speak for banging.
Yeah, passion. And I mean, the manager at the end actually explicitly contemplates suicide. So I mean, he holds a noose in his hand. Is probably the best line in the whole movie.
It's one of the funniest things I've seen in a movie in the past month. I laughed so hard at the reference to suicide in this movie. To give you an idea of what you're playing with here. Go on.
Oh, no, I mean, that seems scarring for anyone.
Scarring? Who's it scarring?
Can you imagine being a
little
kid,
Kirk,
being a kid in that concert arena if this guy would go and kill himself?
But that would never have gotten to that point.
No, of course
at the risk of spoilers. Yeah, what we're referring.
I mean, okay,
to
where are we
the
going to spoil it?
The Spice Girls are, they're not showing up at the concert on time. They've had kind of a row, as they say in London talk. But so they're at the hospital, kind of like basically recentering themselves and kind of falling away from their fame and focusing more on friendships and humanitarian aspects. And meanwhile, the manager is absolutely freaking out. He's going to have an aneurysm. And he says he'll kill himself on stage.
He's going to go on
hang
stage.
himself
This is
stage.
Royal Albert Hall, a live televised event worldwide where he will do this.
In front of millions of 10-year-old girls.
What's he gonna say before he kills himself? The Spice Girls, I hate them.
Spice Girls. Spice Girls M dash. I hate.
I
them.
really want to know the logistics, or like how he's gonna hang himself. Like if he's in the middle of the stage, where is the noose gonna go? There's nothing above you. Or is he gonna bring out like a coat rack?
Should he like choke himself?
But
by
of
pulling
course,
it
the
back?
day is saved when the Spice Girls turn up in the nick of
The
time.
movie never gets that dark, guys. It's
Yeah.
fairly. It's still
But
fun.
hilarious. I'm talking about these tonal shifts, and I have to say, I think the center of this movie, the guy who made this movie, really was Richard E. Grant, who plays the manager. Who I did have to look him up, but he did play Withnell and I, and he just is brilliant in this movie. He
Steals
just
every
really
scene.
steals every scene. Just so overwhelmed and just crazy. He's just so good, and his delivery is perfect, and he works as a good foil to the Spice Girls.
It's an amazing performance that's in this movie. The fact that he really gave his all to the Spice Girls movie, which I admire. Just like he's in this thing, which is kind of it's going to be mocked. It's kind of like a silly little thing, but he really committed to his performance, and he's amazing to watch. He's so fun. He's definitely the highlight.
Oh no, the side characters I think are fantastic, but we also can't forget Roger Moore, who apparently Roger Moore, the chief, his little cameo, who apparently filmed this whole set of cameos that almost mock his cartoonistic like James Bond portrayal.
Exactly.
He filmed it all in a day apparently. But this is a thing that you come out of the movie remembering, I think.
Yeah, I know.
It's
great.
Unbelievably awesome. It's just great.
It makes you smile. I mean, and I think the character that really loosened us up, at least if I were judging the room accurately, would be Barry Humphries as Kevin McMaxford, the media conglomerate, the head, the Rupert Murdoch archetype. Very much, deceitful little old man, very grumpy, hires a paramilitary paparazzo to trail the Spice Girls in a variety of...
Another amazing character, another absolute laugh out loud moment with that guy, his introduction, and he's establishing his like spy credentials. And he presents McMaxford with a picture from when he was 12. So we've been planning this for decades. It's hilarious. But this McMaxford character, he's so over the top. The thing about this movie, the whole cast is really over the top. Mm-hmm. The Spice Girls themselves, they can't really reach those levels because they're not actors. Which is, to be expected. Like they're fine. Mm-hmm. They're the center of the movie, obviously, but their scenes are never quite as fun as these side scenes, these weird tangents. I mean, and they're often the most fun for the stuff that's kind of around them than for what they're bringing to the table specifically. Yeah. But the McMaxford guy, like, there's a scene where he's talking to his crony or his stooge or his
protege,
like his secretary, some guy under him, and he's talking about their plan. He's had this evil plan to get the Spice Girls to break up, which there's like no reason for this plan. It's like it's kind of makes no sense, but which is like I'm sure like it's not a fault of the movie. It's just kind of a silly thing. It's like making fun of how arbitrary this sort of thing might be in another movie.
Well,
but there's rain in the room. It starts raining indoors, and there's no explanation.
Well,
that's the weirdest thing.
That's a pun from the British sitcom The Royal Family. That would actually be a moment. They didn't use laugh tracks. It's not popular in England. But a moment just to kind of incite laughter, show there was laughter, would be just to let it rain.
Really?
The producer,
really?
no clear idea why he wanted to do this. He thought it would be a great idea, and they did it.
It's just
and it caught on in several episodes.
Instant
and that's
drama.
about it.
That's crazy.
This is a mid-'90s TV show that
there's some
working class
context
life.
for you. Holy shit.
Good context. And in fact, the guy who plays Rupert Murdoch's assistant is actually, you may have seen him in some of Guy Ritchie's films. There's a lot of just little
Wait, what's
people.
his name?
His name is Jason Fleming.
Oh, I thought it looked like someone else.
But he's been in some Guy Ritchie movies. You'll see a lot of just sort of people who are just starting out, and of course you see a lot of classics. Elvis Costello appears in a cameo. You got Bob Hoskins.
You've got
Elton
Dominic
John.
West, aka McNulty from The Wire, as a photographer, which got me really excited.
Meatloaf is the bus driver. He plays this substantial role. I mean, relatively. You have Bob Geldof, Bob Hoskins,
Jules Holland, yes, Jonathan Ross, but
Hugh Laurie is in it.
Hugh Laurie.
I think as great as this supporting cast is, though, I really want to get back to the focus, the Spice Girls.
Okay, the themes.
I am curious to know
I don't want to talk about
how
this.
we interpreted this. This is a Spice World movie, and as great as these supporting cast are, we need to look at what's on the focus here. So, Kirk, why don't you start us off? What is it about the Spice Girls? What is it about them? What appealed them?
What appeals to
What
me?
appeals-
About
what makes them a
yes.
focus for you in this movie? What do they do for you here?
I don't know. They're the base. They're the lens through which you look at the media.
Moral
at the
center.
fans. Say again.
Moral center.
Yeah, they are your moral center in the movie. I do like just knowing that they're not truly actors, so you can almost try to see them act, if that makes sense. It's a little bit entertaining for me in that respect, but I don't know. I think I like this movie because there is so much heavy-handedness that we're just dealt with, that we're meant to deal with every day, whether it be in the media, whether it be in popular entertainment. That's something that just is so unabashedly frivolous and candid, but at the same time over the top, is so appreciated, and it's a breath of fresh air. And I hope that moving forward, other studios will look at this movie, because it just came out and we're talking in 1997. No, I want to see more like this, and it's a shame that so much is kind of focused around melodrama, which this film really kind of
Was this
shied
movie
away
a
from.
financial success?
Yeah, it was. It was a budget of like $25 million in the U.S. and
okay.
29 in the U.S. Or sorry, $25 US million. 29 in the U.S. alone. I'm sure is a decent hit in the U.K.
100 million internationally.
Okay,
And
so
what's the budget?
25 million.
25 million.
So it turned a profit.
It turned
did.
to
It turned a
profit.
profit. It did.
Um,
Made its way back.
Director Bob Spears. It's just some no names. Written by Kim Fuller and Jamie Curtis, not to be confused with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Based on an idea by Kim Fuller and the Spice Girls.
Yeah,
All of
one
them.
night.
Well, let's
They're out
get
of
them
town.
credit.
They
Yeah.
were doing some. They were drinking their coffees. They did.
Yeah.
But,
They did want that production credit, but yeah, Anthony. Back to your question. Why don't you elucidate us? What about the couple or the?
You did hear some of my earlier critique of it, but I'm interested in the way these Spice Girls, from very early in the movie, talk about how they're kind of stuck in the stereotypes that have been placed on them since they broke into the biz. Ginger, forgive me if I'm getting the traits and the names mixed up, but Ginger, the smart one, is like, why do I always have to be the one giving facts? And you know what's interesting? They mock her constantly. She's bringing up interesting, smart points, only to be pushed aside. And this goes on. You have the Candy, or was it Candy? Baby Spice, who said, why do I have to be a child? My favorite, Posh Spice, relegated to fashion. And that to me, is the key here. Because look, all of the others adhere to that. They go, we complain, but we're going to accept it. They're constantly rooming in this group. Victoria Beckham, or as she is now known, is standing aside. She's saying, you know what? I am fashion, but I'm not going to let that define me. I'm going to let that define me, but I'm going to make sure it's out of my own will. She's standing aside. She's refusing to do these kind of practical exercises that are assigned to them and saying, you know what? I'm a Spice Girl, and that's okay. Whereas the other ones are saying, I'm a Spice Girl, and I'm doing it because I'm being told.
Okay, real quick about Baby Spice. Something I find very interesting about this, and this might just be as a PG movie, and she's like, everyone's going to see me as a child. I'm not just, even though I'm not so innocent. And then it cuts to a fantasy sequence where, obviously, I'm not so innocent. Obviously, that, sex comes to mind. It's a kid's movie. They can only allude to it. So her fantasy sequence is very weird. It's a murder mystery scenario where, they're like, there's a lineup of people, and they're like, all right, who killed him? And there are all these people, the kind of the stereotypical Manor House murder mystery cast. And then you have Baby Spice on the end, and she's like has ammo belts around her. She's got grenades. It's very in like an army helmet. It's very silly, but it's very odd that that's like her example of how she's not so innocent that she'd like kill somebody because she has weapons. It's just very weird.
Well,
it's like it's kind of a
Well, that's what the film's saying though. It's saying if you don't adhere to these stereotypes already, then you're going to be pushed aside or you're going to be cast in a role that's not really favorable. She's the murderer if she's not Baby Spice. And, and Victoria, they make fun of her in another dream sequence. She's also pregnant and she's basically...
Is Victoria their friend?
This is Posh Spice, the fashionable.
Oh, no, the fantasy where they're all had kids.
There's another fantasy where they all had kids. This idea that if you're not going to be successful, you're going to have multiple kids as if you're a working class family. What's interesting, though, about Posh, and this goes with her name, is she doesn't have to raise those kids, though. She sends them off to boarding school.
That's true.
It's like something out of like a Carol Churchill play.
I mean, this is like a classist thing. This is a working class girl who was pushed into the upper class. Yeah. She doesn't know how to fit that role. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think there's a real problem.
Spice, or they're all working class?
They're all working class, but Posh Spice transforms that by engaging in like this upper class thing that is fashion.
Yeah. I think Baby says at one point, like, when we were kids, we had to worry where our next meal is coming from, which rings pretty false. I gotta say, she doesn't really sell that, but I guess that's part of it.
Well, they mean when they're young kids living in the city trying to make a buck, living hand to mouth while they try to hit it big. I think that's what they mean.
This is a post Margaret Thatcher time period here.
No, it is. There's some class anxiety. I mean, there's some of that.
What do the Spice Girls symbolize for you, Connor?
For me personally, it's interesting. What I find so interesting is, interesting subject, but kind of the whole idea of girl power. And girl power is an interesting thing to trace, like historically, and in the way that it's kind of marketed, like just sort of, they are wholesome. They do have their own traits. But they are sexy women, and they use that, and that's part of their empowerment, and that's kind of interesting to trace. But particularly, I don't think it's so sort of overt as maybe it would later become. And there is some interesting points. There's a point where actually, like, who is it? Like, they actually go and they go to a photo shoot. Now they're having all these anxieties about their roles, and they go to this photo shoot, but they actually change and change into each other's identities. They wear each other's clothes and see what happens, and it's kind of interesting. And I think one of them, I guess it's Baby or something. She's wearing it's Scary Spice. She's wearing Ginger's clothes. She says feminism or whatever.
Yeah, it's played as power.
Feminism, girl power, like as if it's like kind of like this is the high, like this is sort of the lofty thing that Ginger would say that she doesn't really believe in herself, maybe. However, I mean, I'm sure there's other material, Spice Girls material I haven't read or seen.
I feel like there's a lot of context. Every time I saw a character, I'm like, is that part of the Spice Girls mythology?
Yeah.
If I were to go to the Spice Girls wiki, would they have a page with like subsections?
But just interesting is kind of a moment of transition, and this is kind of an early girl group that is totally pop, but that does represent some kind of social thing.
Uh-huh.
I do. I find it interesting, the kind of the intermixing, the back and forth between what seem to be mutually exclusive aspects in certain areas of society, which would be feminist ideology and sexuality or sensuality. So I'm curious as to how they kind of reconcile those two, but they did so in quite a effective manner, I would say. But at risks of boring you all to death with Spice World, we will kind of wrap up, and we'll give a general consensus. We might quantify our opinions of the movie here. Yes or no, simple binary, does Spice World deserve to be in the 706? Tony, you are first.
Kirk, of course not. No way. But I do want to bring up one more point. There is a scene with aliens in this movie, and it is bizarre. It is insane.
Kind of disturbing.
All right.
Yeah. Yes.
So no.
Very Ridley Scott, yes.
No.
Interestingly funny? No, not at all.
May as well say yes.
I was gonna say yes.
Have you guys ever even seen 706?
I know there's only 706.
I definitely have.
I know there's only 706 spots, but I would say it's a great little piece. I mean, like I said, it's our own personal 706. I think it's kind of significant and funny, and it definitely I think it should be a nice part of a constellation that we might construct of cinema through the ages.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we are in America, and that means we are democratic, and I cannot vote. I am exempt. I did put forth this movie, so it was put down. The Spice World is 707 or higher, unfortunately.
Bummer.
The results are in. So, looking forward to our next episode. I wanted to just quickly go around and see what my fellow hosts had on the docket for what they think we should watch next. Tony?
We'll explain that.
Oh, yeah, and I will be deciding the next movie, so they have to appeal to my sensibilities. So maybe we'll get, Spice World 2 if we're lucky.
I've got something for you, Kirk.
Tony and I might as well not even go.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave.
We're taking over this show.
Honestly, I don't know how to follow this up. I'm not going to really try. I'm just going to give you a recommendation of a movie that will be fun. It's a dark comedy starring Robin Williams, and it's called World's Greatest Dad. It's a very underrated movie. It made no money. It was a huge bomb. Did not do very well. But it's kind of developing a sort of cult following. I think it's definitely a very interesting movie, well worth checking out. So I don't want to. It's a movie I think it's best where you don't know that much about it when you go in. So I'm not going to go on too much into the plot or anything, but I think it's interesting and be worth discussing.
Okay.
All right. Well, my movie is a movie I think that got overlooked at the box office this past summer. It is The Man from U.N.C.L.E. soon to be released home video in this upcoming week. I don't know. Sorry, I forgot the date. But here's the thing: it's a movie that was highly criticized as being too stylistic.
Was it really?
As opposed to containing enough substance to carry out the movie. I think it got kind of overshadowed in this past summer with all the other blockbusters, but I think there's a lot of stuff going on here worthy of discussion. And I think it needs to be reviewed for the 706. But that's mine chose.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. And finally, Connor.
All right, boys. It's got to be Josie and the Pussycats. It's immediately related to this movie. It is very similar. I admit. But it's very interesting. It's a very interesting moment. It's like I said, it's of this genre of late 90s comedy, but it does have some commentary. I think it has more commentary than this particular movie does, and I think it's a bit more well executed. We got a great cast. So it's about music. It's about this rise to fame, but there's a lot of playful and subversive elements in it. I think you would like it.
Do we get a chance to argue why our choice is better than their choices?
Yes. Go one more time.
All right, I have issues with both of these choices. Josie and the Pussycats, I'm sure, is a lot of fun. I would love to watch it. But to follow this episode up with that, it's like, I feel like they're too similar. I feel like we're going to be making kind of similar points. I don't know. As for Man from U.N.C.L.E., I've seen it, and I don't enjoy it very much. I don't think it's that interesting at all. Those are my complaints.
All right, fair enough. Any more rebuttals?
Yes, all right. Well, I think Tony pretty much summarized the Josie and the Pussycats counter-argument for me. I'll leave it there, but World's Greatest Dad, it's an okay movie. It's certainly worth watching, given the tragedy of Robin Williams.
It has nothing to do with the tragedy of Robin Williams.
It is an interesting movie to look at the artist's life and the actual production here. I think there's something he brought from his own life into the movie. However, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. is an interesting take. It's filmed beautifully. It has a great cast that are all possibly going to be future stars of tomorrow.
He just loves Alicia Vikander. That's the only reason.
Okay, I am speaking. Okay, ignoring that aspect. This is a movie that decries sexual acts, right?
Decries sexual acts?
Yes, it ignores the sexual element that too heavily encompasses Hollywood blockbusters nowadays, and it looks at two men and gives us a nostalgic throwback that is lacking in current movies.
All right, fair enough.
Homosociality.
Yeah, it is a very homosocial movie.
All right. Why are our choices garbage?
Well, you guys are so rough on me. I got to be rough on you. World's Greatest Dad, waste of a spot. It's a waste.
What do you mean?
You might say it's not associated with the tragedy of Robin Williams. Well, I think it is the tragedy.
It's the movie that killed him?
No,
I
didn't say that.
Why did you say that?
But it did a blow on his career, let me say that. In my eyes, at least. So, and as to Man from U.N.C.L.E., well, I'm sure it's a fun, breezy movie. But I think we need to see some, I don't know, something with a bit more significance and something a bit more historical. Man from U.N.C.L.E., the jury's still out on that one. We know how Josie and the Pussycats was received, and we can respond to it.
That is true. I have not lived a day in my life without someone mentioning Josie and the Pussycats.
It's true.
All right. So I've heard the arguments. I have gone over this in my head for quite a while now, the last 90 seconds, and I really do feel like this is a threshold moment for us, and I feel like we are deciding the future. I'm deciding the future of this podcast right here and now.
No.
So, with that said, I will choose for us to screen Star Wars The Force Awakens next week. I got it early, guys. Okay, no. Honestly, though, I appreciated all of your arguments. You're very succinct and cogent, and
my arguing.
Yes, you're arguing. Yes, but I do feel like we cannot follow this up with Josie and the Pussycats. Otherwise, next week we will be doing From Justin to Kelly, and the week after we will probably be dead.
So, in the hologram.
Yes, exactly. And we can't do The Man from U.N.C.L.E. We're too close to it. We're too close to it. So by default, and not by any merit of its
best way
own,
to win, by default, baby.
World's Greatest Dad.
Thank
And
you
I
very
also
much.
do like the idea of it being Spice World's Greatest Daddy Daycares. The next movie after that, and we'll just make it right.
Let's not
You can
establish
make that
that.
argument next week.
All
That's-
right.
it's not-
Yes.
it's-
Anything goes. Anything
Either
goes.
way,
So-
thank you very much.
So
for
I
tuning in.
win. I win this episode.
Yes,
That's
Tony.
what happened. I
Tony
won.
Tony
has won.
wins, cinema loses.
No. It doesn't work like that. We can only decide if we like the movie, if we all voted in.
Yes,
Then you win.
Spice.
So Kirk lost. Is what
I
happened.
have
lost.
lost, and we obviously have discussed these rules before. So, anyways, I do. From all four of us, I would appreciate very much that you tune in next week and hear us debate World's Greatest Dad. And until then, thank you very much for listening. And as always, girl power.
Hey guys, today's sponsor is Dog Box. That's a dog in a box every month. You know, it's hard to make a living making podcasts here in the studio, so we need to plug some products now and then. And this is a product I use that I love. And basically, it's $19.99 a month, and they send you a new dog every month. And that's a dog of your choice in gender, age, and breed if you want. Or you can say, surprise me, and they'll send you a dog of their choice. And this is a lot of fun. I love my new dog every month, and I think you're going to love it too.
I wish I could have that.
And if you enter the code, the 706, that's THESEVENOHSIX, exclamation point, 1. Thanks for tuning in.